reality itself. Because we've got this collection of sources, I mean, neuroscience, mathematics, even military history. And they all seem to suggest that the reality we kind of agree upon is maybe profoundly fragile. We're going to start with that, that classic glitch in the matrix feeling, the Mandela effect.
Right, that collective remembering of something that wasn't actually the case.
Exactly. Like the Berenstain Bears. Millions remembered it's spelled with an E, Berenstain.
Yeah, but it's always been a Berenstain. Always.
Or the big one, Nelson Mandela.
Yeah.
So many people were absolutely convinced he died back in prison, in the 80s.
When, of course, he actually passed away in 2013. It's a huge discrepancy.
For years, this stuff was just like internet weirdness, right?
Yeah.
A curiosity.
Right.
But our mission today, what we're really trying to do, is trace the path. How does a tiny, linguistic, slip up in one person's head? How does that scale up into this massive shared cultural reality? One that sort of fulfills itself.
Mm-hmm.
What if the Mandela effect isn't, aliens or parallel universes?
Yeah.
But actually a failure, like a really spectacular, measurable failure of your brain's own autocorrect system.
Right. And the failure is triggered by this fundamental clash, a conflict between the language we use every day and, well, the actual nature of our memory.
Okay.
And what's really fascinating looking at this particular stack of sources is how you have to bring together fields that almost never talk to each other.
Yeah, it seems that way.
We're bridging neuroscience, the math behind how things spread socially, psychological theory, and this really interesting concept called hyperstition.
Hyperstition. We'll definitely need to unpack that one.
Oh, yeah. We're essentially building a framework here. And it suggests that reality, the one we all experience, is sort of negotiated, moment by moment. And language is the key negotiating tool.
Okay, so language is central.
Yeah.
And you mentioned two core ideas we need to grasp to follow this negotiation.
Absolutely. Foundational concepts for this whole deep dive. First one, the big one, is the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. You might also hear it called linguistic relativity.
Right, I've heard of that.
It's this pretty radical idea that language isn't just a tool we use to, label things that are already there.
Okay.
It actively sculpts our reality. It organizes it. It even limits what we can easily perceive or think about.
So if your language doesn't have a word for something.
It literally becomes harder, sometimes almost impossible, to really grasp that concept fully. Language builds the mental framework.
Wow, okay. That's that's big.
And the second concept.
The second one is hyperstition. This is where the cultural rubber meets the road, so to speak.
Hyperstition. It describes fictions, basically. Stories, ideas. But these aren't just stories. They gain real causal power.
Causal power, how?
Through belief. Through intense collective cultural belief and, importantly, participation. Acting as if the fiction is true. These ideas kind of bootstrap themselves into becoming functionally true. They become actual mechanisms for generating reality.
Okay, so fictions that make themselves real through belief.
Exactly. And we're going to show how these two forces, Sapir-Whorf, the linguistic sculptor, and hyperstition, the cultural engine, how they combine to create things like the Mandela effect, these massive collective false memories.
Okay, let's dig into that conflict then.
Yeah.
Because you said this whole process, this scaling up from one person's error to millions,
Yeah.
it starts with a conflict deep inside the brain, something hidden.
Yeah, exactly. And it involves two experiences that feel really distinct to us. I mean, completely different feelings, usually. Nostalgia and deja vu.
Right. Nostalgia, that warm feeling, looking back, maybe longing for the past, often voluntary.
Mm-hmm. And deja vu. That weird, spooky feeling like, I've been here before, but you haven't. It's involuntary, often unsettling. Feels like a glitch.
Totally different vibes.
In our language, yes. English specifically treats them as polar opposites. New familiar glitch versus past longing, binary.
But the science, the neuro-linguistic studies you mentioned.
That's where it gets wild. If you actually look under the hood, using brain imaging, fMRI, ERP studies, the evidence for their neurological unity is just overwhelming.
Unity. Between nostalgia and deja vu.
Massive unity. These studies found a huge 70% overlap in the brain regions that become active when people experience either feeling.
70%?
Yeah.
Wait, that's enormous.
It really is.
So the brain is basically running the same core software package for two things we insist are totally separate experiences.
Precisely. They fire up the exact same networks. You've got the hippocampal memory systems crucial for mapping time and place, the reward and emotional processing circuit.
Right, the feeling part.
And the medial prefrontal cortex circuits involved in self-reflection, thinking about yourself in time.
Wow.
And it's not just location. EEG studies looking at brainwaves show they operate using identical theta and gamma oscillatory signatures.
Brain rhythms.
Yeah, the specific electrical rhythms associated with memory retrieval and, crucially, binding different pieces of information together into a coherent whole.
So neurologically, they're just different flavors of the same underlying system.
Exactly. Functionally different expressions, maybe, but rooted in a single unified memory reward temporal binding system, like a single holistic time echo sensation, if you want to think of it that way.
Okay, so brain experience is one thing, like this unified time echo, but our language demands we split it in two. Sharp distinction.
And that brings us right back to Sapir-Whorf, the linguistic rift.
The conflict.
Yeah, the brain feels something that's, say, 70% unified. But the dictionary, our language, says, nope, 100% different. Pick one. What happens then?
It sounds like.
It is. This is where the structural cage of language really clamps down. The words we use aren't just labels after the fact. They actively sculpt how we categorize and think about time, memory, familiarity.
So by defining nostalgia and déjà vu linguistically as this strict binary,
we train our own cognition. We force ourselves to treat this unified brain state as if it's two distinct opposing things, regardless of the neural reality.
it's like we build mental walls where there aren't any in the brain.
That's a great way to put it. The sources call them artificial cognitive scaffolds.
Okay.
Imagine like trying to pour lukewarm water into two buckets, one labeled HOT and one labeled cold D. You have to mentally force the experience into one box or the other, even though it doesn't really fit either perfectly. You fragment the reality to match the label.
So this simple act of talking about it, or even just thinking about it using our restrictive binary language, that forces the brain into this, like, structurally impossible situation.
Exactly. It's an unsustainable conflict.
Yeah.
And this forcing, this pressure, it generates significant and actually measurable cognitive dissonance.
Dissonance.
Like mental static.
Sort of.
Yeah.
The brain is struggling. It's desperately trying to reconcile the unified feeling it's getting, that 70% overlap, with the contradictory, separate linguistic boxes it's forced to use.
And you're saying this internal struggle, this dissonance, this is the seed of the Mandela effect.
It's the spark. It creates the underlying vulnerability. Think about the Berenstain thing again.
Yeah.
It emerges as the mind's spectacular failure, really, to resolve this fundamental clash between felt experience and linguistic category.
Okay.
If your brain is constantly wrestling with this low-level structural contradiction whenever it deals with time and memory, then when it encounters an ambiguous bit of information later.
Like the spelling of a name from childhood. Exactly. Something tied to nostalgia, maybe. It's already primed for error. It's prone to overcorrection. It might just snap to the linguistically defined category that feels most, I don't know, coherent or expected, even if it's factually wrong.
So it picks Berenstain because I feels more common or something?
Perhaps, or maybe the I spelling got reinforced somehow through this dissonance process earlier. The key is the brain makes an error trying to resolve the conflict.
And then this error scales up culturally.
Because the underlying linguistic conflict, the Sapir-Whorf pressure, exists in all of us using the language. That linguistic rift creates a structural weakness system-wide, making individuals highly susceptible to later misdirection or, well...
really shifts the whole frame. It's not, is reality glitching? It's more like, when and why does my brain decide to ignore its own signals because language tells it to?
Right.
And you're saying this isn't just a theory anymore. We have hard neurological data showing language actively messing with memory. How fast, how aggressively.
We do. It's pretty stark. The process is rooted in something called the neural binding problem.
Binding. It's like gluing memories together.
Kind of. It's the brain's fundamental challenge. How does it take all the different elements of an experience, what you saw, heard, felt, the timing of it all, and integrate them into one single coherent memory trace?
Okay.
That integration process, that binding, it breaks down. Specifically, it gets compromised when language forces us to artificially separate phenomena that neurally belong together, like our nostalgia déjà vu system.
So language acts like scissors, cutting the threads that bind a memory together.
That's a good analogy. And when this breakdown happens, is it like a slow leak or a sudden snap?
Yeah, it's a gradual.
Remarkably fast. These neural binding conflicts, they're measurable in brain activity, and they happen incredibly quickly. We're talking within 100 to 200 milliseconds of the moment you try to apply a linguistic category.
Wait, 100 milliseconds? That's
Yeah.
less than the blink of an eye.
Less than a blink. Think about it. Just attempting to slap a label like nostalgia or déjà vu onto that unified time echo feeling instantly compromises the coherence of the memory being formed or retrieved.
It's like a cognitive shockwave that. Can we actually see the brain struggling with this? Like light up on a scan?
We absolutely can. During those incredibly brief 100, 200 millisecond conflict windows, objective measurements show significant changes in brain activity. Specifically, the left frontotemporal language network.
The brain's language center.
Right. The region handling semantics, grammar, meaning. It shows a measurable 40 to 60% increase in activation.
Whoa. So it's working overtime.
Massively over time.
Yeah.
That spike is the brain urgently trying to process an impossible instruction. Reconcile this unified feeling with these two separate contradictory labels now.
Okay, so language creates the instability almost instantly. But how does just using the word change the actual experience itself? Does saying nostalgia make it feel different?
It absolutely does. This moves us from the structure of the conflict to the function of language. It's the power of verbal labeling. There are controlled studies on this. They'd induce that unified time echo state in participants. Then they'd ask some of them to verbally label the feeling, okay, call this nostalgia or call this déjà vu.
And what happened?
The very act of putting that specific verbal label on the experience significantly reduced its intensity by 25 to 40%.
Just naming it dampened the feeling.
Yes. It's direct evidence. Linguistic categorization actively fragments the underlying unified neural experience. It diminishes its holistic power, makes it less whole.
That's the vulnerability window opening up right there.
Precisely.
But okay, to get to a collective false memory, like Berenstain, you need more than just weakening the original right. You need to actually build a replacement memory.
Yeah.
How does the false part get constructed neurally?
We can actually trace that construction process in real time too, using event-related potentials or ERP.
ERPs. Those measure electrical activity in the brain, split-second responses.
Exactly. Tiny voltage changes on the scalp linked to specific cognitive events. And when linguistic interference destabilizes a memory, we see two very specific ERP signatures pop up, one after the other.
Okay, what are they?
First, you get the frontal N400 component. The N400 is a well-known signal. It typically indicates the brain detecting something unexpected, a semantic violation, like reading a sentence that ends weirdly.
So it's the brain's, wait, what? Signal.
Wait, that doesn't fit. In this context, when language conflicts with the unified memory trace, the N400 fires, signaling that the existing memory structure is now unstable, mismatched. It makes the memory malleable.
Okay, so N400 destabilizes the original. What happens next?
Immediately following the N400, you often see another signal, the late posterior negativity, or LPN.
LPN.
This signal is different. It reflects the subsequent constructive processing. It's the brain actively working to build a new memory structure to resolve the conflict flagged by the N400.
So the LPN is the signature of the false memory actually being built.
It reflects the neural effort involved in constructing that new, potentially false representation. The N400 opens the door, creates the vulnerability, and the LPN reflects the brain trying to build something new, something coherent with the linguistic label, even if it's factually incorrect. It's the construction phase of the false memory.
Okay, I need to circle back to something from the outline.
Yeah.
This 72% prediction rate, that sounded huge.
It is, and it ties directly into this N400 LPN process and another concept, reconsolidation interference.
Reconsolidation, that's when memories become changeable after you recall them.
Exactly. Every time you retrieve a memory, it's not like pulling a file from a cabinet. It becomes temporarily unstable, labile. It has to be resaved or reconsolidated.
Okay.
And during that brief window of instability, it's vulnerable to being altered. This is where linguistic reminders come in.
Like someone casually mentioning the correct spelling of Berenstain while you're thinking about the books.
Precisely. Applying that linguistic categorization attempt during memory reactivation creates critical 24 to 72-hour vulnerability windows.
A whole day or 3.
Yes. During that period, the retrieved memory before it fully reconsolidates.
And if, during that window, you encounter that strong linguistic recategorization, like a really convincing argument online for Berenstain,
the rate of false intrusions, bits of the wrong information getting woven into the memory increases dramatically by a measurable 35 to 55%.
Wow.
And here's the kicker. Those prediction studies used machine learning algorithms, specifically linear classifiers. They fed the real-time ERP data into the algorithm.
The N400 and LPN signals.
Exactly. And based purely on detecting those specific electrical signatures in the brain as they happened, the algorithms could predict with 72% accuracy whether the person's original memory was about to be successfully corrupted and replaced by the false information.
That is staggering. 72% accuracy in predicting memory corruption based on brainwaves reacting to language.
It implies this isn't random mental noise, it's a mechanistic process, a predictable sequence of neural events triggered by linguistic conflict.
Which means it's not just predictable, it's potentially exploitable. It could theoretically be engineered, weaponized.
That is the profound implication, yes.
Okay, so we've got the mechanism. Language creates conflict, N400 fires, vulnerability opens, LPN builds something new, reconsolidation locks it in, potentially incorrectly. That's the glitch in one person.
Right, the initial spark.
But the Mandela effect isn't one person misremembering. It's millions sharing the same false memory.
Yeah.
How do we get from that single neural flaw to, well, to a massive self-reinforcing cultural belief?
That's the scaling problem. And the crucial conceptual leap here, according to these sources, is hyperstition.
Right, hyperstition again. Fictions that make themselves real. How does that connect to Berenstain Bears?
Hyperstition is the engine that takes that initial neurological glitch and turns it into a cultural phenomenon. It's the idea that certain concepts, certain fictions gain actual causal power in the world through collective investment.
Okay, explain collective investment.
It means people believing in the fiction, talking about it, searching for evidence for it, acting based on it. This creates positive feedback circuits.
Like a snowball effect.
Exactly. The more people believe and talk about the Berenstain spelling, the more the idea spreads. The more it spreads, the more people check their own memories and counter that cognitive dissonance we talked about.
Triggering their own N400 vulnerability.
Precisely. And then the dominant cultural narrative, maybe it was Berenstain, maybe it's a glitch in the matrix, maybe dimensions crossed, provides the framework for the LPN to construct the false memory.
So the hyperstitional story about the glitch actually helps create the glitch in more people's memories.
Yes. The shared narrative actively retrofits individual memories. It transforms that initial, maybe random, neurological error into a powerful cultural engine. An engine that demands more people recall the hyperstitional incorrect version to maintain its own coherence. The story needs believers, and it helps create them by exploiting that linguistic vulnerability.
Wow. The story literally recruits memories.
In a way, yes. The cultural story reinforces the brain's linguistically triggered overcorrection.
And this spread, this collective sharing, it's not just random chat, is it? You mentioned mathematical models. Does it spread like a virus?
Very much so. There are robust mathematical models detailing the dynamics of how false information, including false memories, propagates through social networks.
And what do they show? Is it fast?
Shockingly fast and efficient. Some studies simulated discussion rounds. They found that 64% of individual false memories became collectively shared, meaning adopted by the majority of the group within just 3 rounds of discussion.
3 rounds. That could be one online forum thread or, like you said, a lunch break conversation.
Exactly. It's not a slow creep of misinformation. It's a rapid cascading acceptance of the manufactured or mistaken reality.
What fuels that speed? Why is it so contagious?
A major amplifier is emotional valence.
The feeling attached to the memory or the story.
Precisely. If the false memory or the hyperstitional narrative explaining it is wrapped up in strong emotion, maybe the warm fuzzies of nostalgia for a childhood book.
Or the fear and paranoia about conspiracy, or wonder about glitches in reality.
Right. High emotional content significantly boosts the transmission rate. The models suggest it increases the spread rate by around 40%.
40% faster, just because it feels significant.
Yes. Emotional narratives grab attention, they resonate, they bypass critical thinking sometimes, and they rapidly gain collective acceptance, often completely regardless of whether they're factually true or not. They plug right into those linguistic vulnerabilities and the dissonance they cause.
But it's not just about adding the false memory, is it? Does sharing the Berenstain story also make people forget the Berenstain truth?
It absolutely does. And this is maybe one of the most insidious parts. Systematic collective forgetting.
Collective forgetting. How does a group forget together?
It happens through conversation itself. The process is called socially shared retrieval-induced forgetting.
Okay, break that down. Retrieval-induced forgetting. That's when remembering one thing makes you forget related things.
Exactly. If you practice recalling apple, pear, banana, You get better at recalling those, but you actually become worse at recalling other fruits you didn't practice, like mango or kiwi. Remembering inhibits related memories.
Okay, I get that for one person. How does it become socially shared?
When a group talks together, they collaboratively decide what to retrieve and discuss. If the conversation focuses intensely on the hyperstitional details, the I spelling, the Mandela death date, the glitch explanations,
They are repeatedly retrieving those details.
and collectively not retrieving the related true details that contradict the narrative, like the actual spelling or Mandela's real history.
So by talking about the wrong thing, the group unintentionally makes everyone in the group forget the right thing.
Systematically forget it. The act of shared conversation, focused on the hyperstitional narrative, actively suppresses and eventually helps erase the conflicting true information from the collective memory pool. It's a powerful way to reinforce the desired, manufactured reality simply by controlling the linguistic focus of the group discussion. Starve the true memory of attention.
That's subtle and powerful. Okay, this feels like we're getting into really strange territory now. The idea of a group collaboratively defining reality through language.
Yeah.
It almost sounds like physics. Which brings us to the most out there idea in the sources, quantum cognition.
It is definitely theoretical, pushing the boundaries, but
Yeah.
it's compelling because it maps so well onto what we've discussed.
So applying quantum concepts.
Core idea is that certain mental states, maybe especially ambiguous ones like memories or those unified temporal experiences, that 70% overlap state might exist in a kind of superposition.
Superposition. Like Schrodinger's cat, neither alive nor dead until observed.
Exactly. The memory isn't definitively A or B. It exists as a potential, a blur of possibilities, until it's measured or observed.
And in this theory, what constitutes measurement?
This is the radical part. When groups of people collectively discuss these ambiguous memory states.
Like arguing about Berenstain.
And crucially, when they use the separated binary categorical language imposed by a Sapir-Whorf, forcing the time echo into either nostalgia or deja vu, forcing the spelling into A or A, they are, in effect, performing a collective measurement.
So the act of millions of people agreeing online that the spelling must be Berenstain, that is the measurement.
According to this theoretical framework, yes, the collective linguistic consensus acts like the physicist opening the box.
And what does the measurement do?
It forces the potential state, the superposition of the memory, to collapse.
Collapse.
Collapse out of that fuzzy state of potential into a single, definite, classical reality, the consensus reality, even if that consensus is based on the initial linguistic error and dissonance.
So the group literally chooses which version becomes real through agreement and language.
And this collapse effect, the theory suggests, strengthens massively with group size and the degree of linguistic consensus. The more people agree on the label, the more forcefully reality snaps into that defined state. It turns the collective mind, mediated by language, into an active observer that determines which version of reality solidifies.
Okay, let's try and bring this back down to Earth, or at least what we think is Earth after this conversation.
Yeah, it gets pretty mind-bending.
We've basically outlined a process where language can fragment our core experiences of time and memory, creating predictable vulnerabilities.
Right, the N400LPN sequence, the reconsolidation windows.
And then hyperstition and social contagion can hijack those vulnerabilities to scale up a single error into a shared, potentially false reality. A reality that can even be reinforced by collective forgetting and maybe even quantum-like collapse.
That's the chain of events suggested by synthesizing these sources.
So the unavoidable question then becomes, if this process is understandable, predictable, maybe even calculable, who stands to benefit from engineering collective reality this way? Who would want to weaponize false memories or weaponize nostalgia?
And the sources point to pretty clear strategic applications, unfortunately. We're moving beyond accidental glitches now into the realm of targeted, sophisticated manipulation, exploiting these cognitive weak points for specific gains.
Both governments and companies.
Both state actors and major commercial entities, yes. The motivations differ, but the underlying mechanisms are the same.
Okay, let's start with state actors. Disinformation psyops. The sources mention Jacques Vallée and his control system idea. This isn't just simple fake news, is it?
No, Vallée's concept is much deeper. He's a respected computer scientist and, famously, a UFO researcher. He proposed, quite radically, that the UFO phenomenon itself might not be, little green men in spaceships. He suggested it might be a kind of cosmic psyop, a multidimensional thermostat deliberately interacting with human consciousness.
A thermostat. Tweaking us. How?
By presenting phenomena that are inherently ambiguous, powerful, and resistant to easy categorization. Think about historical waves of sightings. Fairies, then mystery airships, then Foo Fighters, then flying saucers, now maybe drones or triangles.
The phenomenon seems to change its appearance over time.
Exactly. Vallée argued the form changes to match our cultural expectations, but the function remains the same, to present something that forces us to struggle with categorization, to apply inadequate linguistic labels.
Which, based on what we've discussed, triggers the cognitive dissonance, fires the N400, creates that instability.
Precisely. The control system inherently exploits the Sapir-Whorf limitation. The ambiguity is the mechanism. It primes the population for altered beliefs by destabilizing existing ones.
Okay, that's the theory. Is there evidence of, like, human agencies using this system, hijacking the thermostat for their own games?
There is a documented chilling example, the Paul Bennewitz case. It's almost a smoking gun for this kind of exploitation.
Okay, what happened there? Late 70s, early 80s.
Right. Bennewitz was a physicist, an electronics genius, running a company in Albuquerque, New Mexico, right next to Kirtland Air Force Base. He started detecting strange electronic signals and lights near the base, unusual flight patterns.
And he thought, aliens.
He initially wasn't sure, but he was picking up something real. What he was actually detecting, we now know, were highly classified tests of early stealth aircraft and potentially other advanced projects happening within the Manzano Mountain facility.
Top secret stuff the Air Force definitely didn't want noticed.
Absolutely not. But Bennewitz was smart, technically capable. They couldn't just brush him off easily. He had data.
So what do they do?
The Air Force Office of Special Investigations, AFOSI, got involved. And they didn't just deny his findings. They launched an incredibly sophisticated counterintelligence operation. They decided to actively hijack the control system Vallée described.
Hijack it. How?
They leaned into the strangeness. They essentially confirmed his worst fears, but amplified them wildly. AFOSI, along with other intelligence community assets, began feeding Bennewitz information.
Feeding him what?
Forged documents. Elaborate, escalating stories about hostile aliens, secret underground bases beneath Dulce, New Mexico, captured UFOs, intricate but ultimately nonsensical alien codes he needed to decipher.
They built an entire false reality around him, using the alien narrative.
Yes. They deliberately used specific linguistic labels, aliens, invasion, conspiracy, and hyperstitional narratives that they knew would tap into existing cultural fears and resonate with the ambiguous signals he was detecting. They overloaded his cognitive system.
They intentionally triggered the conflict, the dissonance, probably boosted by fear, the emotional valence.
They absolutely did. They manufactured a reality designed to consume him. The explicit goal, documented internally, was to discredit him, to make him seem like a paranoid, obsessed UFO nut so that nobody would take his actual, valid detections of classified technology seriously.
So the alien story was purely a smokescreen.
A perfect, weaponized hyperstition. It induced systematic collective, forgetting everyone focused on the sensational and false alien story, systematically ignoring and forgetting the true, unmentioned military activity that was the real secret. They weaponized Bennewitz's own cognitive rift against him, and by extension, against public knowledge.
That is profoundly disturbing and effective.
Chillingly so.
Okay, let's pivot then. That's the state using it for secrecy. How do big companies use these same principles? They don't have a foci running black ops, presumably.
Presumably not, but they are deeply, deeply invested in shaping our reality, specifically our reality concerning their brands and products. They use the exact same underlying hyperstitional mechanism.
Creating fictions that become functionally real.
Yes, but focused on brand mythology. Crafting narratives about a flawless company legacy, a revolutionary product origin, a perfect user experience. Making these often fictional or exaggerated categories functionally real through our collective behavior, specifically our purchasing decisions.
How do they tap into the nostalgia deja vu thing?
They exploit that unified system directly. Remember the 70% neural overlap. Companies understand that intuitively, if not neurologically.
So when they launch a retro product, or reboot a franchise,
they don't just market it as new. They use very specific linguistic triggers, imagery, music cues, designed to activate both the nostalgia networks, I remember this warm feeling from my past, and the deja vu networks. This feels strangely familiar, like it was always meant to be.
They want you to feel like you already know it, like it's destiny.
Exactly. It's what the sources called a soft temporal hack. They engineer a feeling of deep, almost predestined familiarity and trust. It bypasses critical evaluation and significantly enhances brand loyalty. They're creating a hyperstitional relationship with the brand that feels more real, more historically grounded than the often mundane reality of corporate decisions.
Think about all the reboots. 80s, 90s, nostalgia is a huge market.
It's a massive industry built on selling the emotionally charged, hyperstitional memory of the franchise or the era. We know that emotional valence increases acceptance by 40%. They aren't just selling a product, they're selling access to a specific, curated, often inaccurate, but emotionally powerful version of the past.
And does this allow for that strategic forgetting, too, like the AFOSI example?
Absolutely. Companies can use this mechanism for strategic forgetting. If a company has, say, a history of problematic labor practices or a product that had major flaws,
We don't want people remembering that.
so they can introduce a powerful, emotionally resonant myth, a story about the pure intentions of the founder, or the classic perfection of the original, often glossing over its issues.
And by focusing the conversation on that emotionally appealing myth.
They trigger socially shared, retrieval-induced forgetting. The collective discussion centers on the positive hyperstition, and the unfavorable historical facts or previous product failures systematically fade from collective memory because they aren't being retrieved or discussed. The myth overwrites the inconvenient history.
It seems the clear lesson here, whether it's spies or marketing teams, is that the words we choose, the categories we use, they aren't just descriptive. They are potentially the levers for controlling collective thought and even collective memory.
They are the keys to the kingdom of consensus reality.
Wow. Okay. This has been, a necessarily deep, detailed, and frankly, a pretty unsettling deep dive today.
It connects a lot of dots that maybe feel disparate usually.
Totally. We've laid out this really clear pathway, starting at the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, how language itself creates fault lines by fragmenting unified experiences like nostalgia and déjà vu.
Building those artificial cognitive scaffolds.
Right. Then we saw the neuroscience, how that conflict triggers measurable brain activity like the N400 and LPN, opening up these 24 to 72-hour vulnerability windows where memories can be rewritten.
The mechanics of the glitch itself.
And then, crucially, how hyperstition and the mathematics of social contagion take that individual vulnerability and scale it, bootstrapping false memories into functional shared realities through belief and collective forgetting.
Realities that can then be, and have been, strategically exploited by state actors for disinformation and secrecy, like the Benowitz case, and by corporations weaponizing nostalgia for profit. So I think the really crucial takeaway here is that something like the Mandela effect isn't just some weird paranormal event or a sign the universe is broken.
It's more internal.
It seems to emerge from this incredibly sophisticated and increasingly measurable interplay between our own neural processing, the restrictive categories our language imposes on us, and the undeniable power of social consensus.
We build the reality we agree on, even if the agreement is based on an initial error amplified by language.
When we agree on a label, especially collectively, we might actually be forcing reality, or at least our memory of it, to collapse into that labeled state. We're not passive experiencers. We are, in a very real sense, the active architects of the glitch.
Okay. So as we wrap up this deep dive, there's one final piece, a provocative, maybe even practical detail from the sources that you should probably keep in mind as you navigate the, let's call it the reality streams this week.
Yeah, this comes from the mathematical modeling work again. The same models that showed how fast false memories can spread also revealed something about how they fade. Collective memory, whether it's based on truth or a hyperstitional narrative, seems to follow a predictable two-phase decay model. It peaks, then it starts to fade.
Okay, memories decay, that makes sense.
But the models found something more specific. Apparently universal switching points. The moment when the collective attention really starts to wane, when the decay rapidly accelerates, that point seems to consistently occur 10 to 11 days after peak attention on the topic.
10 to 11 days. That's specific.
That's what the models suggest. We've essentially mathematically defined the approximate shelf life of a collective memory's peak influence.
So we can calculate, roughly, when a shared memory, true or false, starts to significantly fade from the collective consciousness.
It seems we can get a ballpark figure.
Which leads to a pretty significant ethical question, doesn't it?
It does. If we can calculate when a collective false memory, or even a deliberately seeded hyperstitional narrative, is naturally scheduled to start decaying.
What's the ethical responsibility then? Do you try to reinforce it if you think it's useful? Or Conversely, do you have an obligation to actively interrupt that decay if it's harmful, or maybe just let it fade naturally, or even accelerate the decay?
Who gets to decide and based on what criteria?
Exactly. So maybe think about that over the next week or so. Think about the information bubbles you're in, the stories gaining traction, the memories being debated, and consider the power your own linguistic choices, your agreements, your disagreements hold over collective reality.
Especially around that 10 to 11 day mark.